Hi, Kay.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you? Oh
I'm great. It's been a while.
my gosh, I know, right? I was like, when was that dinner again? Like, that was
It was
years
a
ago,
long
right?
time ago.
Well, thank you so much for even like thinking of me. I love this idea. Like, good on you.
At the dinner, Kay, you told me a little bit about your journey in becoming a news reporter. So, do you
Yeah.
want to start off by maybe telling us a little bit about your Listen Up show for NBC and how exactly you're using your platform to create change?
Yeah, for sure. So, Listen Up is a digital show. It's like a mini newscast right from your phone. So, it's on Instagram and it also airs on Facebook and YouTube. And we also have an MP3 version if you like to listen on Alexa, so just with audio. And the show basically runs you through everything you need to know about New York in under 2 minutes. So, we're going to be telling you about the weather, we're going to tell you about the biggest story of the day, and just other things we think you need to know, right? So, maybe it's the top entertainment story, or right now, of course, where we're dealing with the pandemic. So
Mhm.
who's donating what and who's doing, a good job of just being like selfless, right? We really love those stories, especially in this time. But before the pandemic, it was pretty much just like anything worth talking about that maybe you and your friends maybe have had a conversation about. Maybe it's like a trending topic on Twitter. So it really runs through the gamut of topics, but you'll definitely get about 3 to 4 stories in under 2 minutes about everything you need to know about New York.
Got it. So, at what age did you discover your passion for journalism? Was there something specific that really sparked your interest?
Yeah, so I want to say it definitely started in middle school. So before I got to high school, I already knew that I wanted to get into journalism because as a young kid, I was super high strung. I was like, I need to know what I'm going to do with the rest of my life. So in middle school, I had a conversation with my mom, and we basically, ran through what it was that I enjoyed doing. It was, what are the things that I love and how can we mold that, or meld it into a career, right?
Mhm.
So this was me pre-high school, and we're like, okay, well, you know that you love to write, right? At the time I loved writing, I loved telling stories, like written stories. I loved going to concerts, I loved entertainment, right? So at the time I was watching e-news like almost all the time, and I enjoyed traveling to go to those concerts. So at the time, I was just like, yeah, how do I put all this together? Oh, and I love talking and listening. I would enjoy like standing up in the middle of class and giving presentations. Like, presentations were my favorite assignments, and like putting together, a presentation, right? So like a story, and telling people about it. So all that to say, long story short, uh, there is a reporter at the time, a host, Jilliana Rancic. She hosted E News at the time, and I loved that she was just able to be herself. She was able to travel for stories or red carpets. She was able to interview celebrities and get their story and humanize celebs, and just by getting them to be themselves. So I was like, oh my gosh, I think I want to do that. So fast forward, I covered a lot of red carpet events. um, I covered a lot of just various stories along the way. So I've done kind of like a mix. I want to say it definitely started off as just purely entertainment. So, like you mentioned in your email, I've done Sundance Film Festival. I've covered the Grammys. I've covered the MTV, VMAs, the music, TV and music award, TV and movie awards. And yeah, just a bunch of different red carpets. But now that started to translate, obviously, into more like local, news stories, more personal, general news is what we call it. So, but I sprinkle in entertainment here and there.
Since you've had the opportunity to cover so many amazing events, is there like one specific event or topic that you've enjoyed the most, or like something you found really interesting, and why?
Yeah, I would say of all the topics I've covered, I'm gonna go with. So there was this guy in Washington D.C. So after I graduated college, and I went from LA, right? So I went to school in California. I went to USC. And then my first job out of college was in Virginia. And while I was there, you know, my boss, she's like, hey, like I have this friend, he's this historian, and he like knows a lot about first ladies. And of course, at first, I'm like, you know, girl, like I didn't say that, but I'm like, this sounds like kind of a snooze fest of a story, you know, to be real. I'm like, a historian, like, you know, what are we gonna do with this? But she's like, no, like, hey, this guy is not what you think. Like, the dude rides a motorcycle. He's got tattoos like all over him. Like, he's a total biker. But here he is talking about, you know, the nation's like first ladies, as delicate and feminine as they are. So I was like, okay, this sounds interesting, you know, but how are we going to tell it? So long story short, I mentioned he was a biker. So we went on the back of his Harley, you know, his motorcycle, and drove around Washington, D.C. and basically like picked different spots where he could tell us interesting things about first ladies that the average person wouldn't know or think to know about. So that was super fun. And I'd say it was my favorite because it's just, you know, not something that otherwise I would have, I guess, known about. But I love how it came about, right? It was just like someone saying, hey, I know this person. And honestly, I think those are the best stories oftentimes are when, you know, from just having conversations with people. Like I remember in college, one of my favorite stories from college was, you know, I was, to be completely honest, I had an assignment that was due, and I'm gonna turn off my mute really quick. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. Because I think you can hear my like notifications. So I was in college and I was having a conversation with one of my friends. I had an assignment due in like a few weeks. I was super behind and I had nothing planned. I was like, oh my gosh, what am I gonna do for this freaking assignment? And I'm talking to my friend. I'm like, dude, do you know if anything, you know, in LA or just anything happening that is super interesting or cool? And he's like, yeah, actually, you know, I ride my bike around LA often, and one of my buddies is a cowboy. And I was like, hold the phone. What? Like, wait, rewind. What are you talking about? He's like, yeah, my friend is a cowboy in Compton, which if you know anything about Compton or the, you know, I don't want to say stereotype, but the, you know, the idea that comes with Compton is you think of gangs or you think of the hood, you know, you don't think of cowboys. And so that, when he told me, just like, you know, made me go, oh my gosh, what the heck, I need to get in touch with your friend. And so I was able to, you know, reach out and do the story. And till this day, it's one of my favorites, along with the one that I told you about, because it came about so organically of like, hey, do you know someone, you know, and that's how it happened. Okay, putting my mute back off.
So what is something you love the most about your job? Like what makes it different from other career options?
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is, for me, you know, a lot of what got me into journalism, or I'll say one of the aspects about the job that I, you know, the most is getting outside. You know, I knew I didn't want to spend my days in an office, you know, in a cubicle. Although funny enough, I do spend a lot of time there because I'm like editing these days. So it's like kind of a funny balance. But what I love about it is getting outside and talking to people. Like that I love the most. Like when I met you all, right? Like at the YAB dinner, and just like speaking with people and, you know, learning about like where you're from, what are your interests, you know, just like finding those cool stories I was telling you about. You know, when you meet people and you hear their stories, like the mind just starts working, and that's like what I feed off of, is having conversations with people and getting out into our world and seeing things and seeing people and, you know, finding those stories. So for me, that's definitely, you know, one of my favorite parts that has definitely continued to spark joy as I continue, you know, in this industry. So yeah.
Do you have any pieces of advice for someone that wants to follow in your footsteps? Something they should keep in mind while pursuing such a career?
Yes, I would say literally this goes with what I was talking about. Continue speaking with people, like anyone. Like, do not be afraid to just like have conversations with anyone, even strangers. I mean, don't go around just talking to anybody for no reason. But, you know, it's just like, being able to kind of step out of your comfort zone sometimes. Like I'll give you another example of one of my favorite stories from most recently. At my last job, I was on a train platform in Harlem, and I saw this guy, and he wasn't wearing shoes, like at all. And I know, like at first it's like, okay, like New York, like sometimes you'll see crazy things, but like he had no shoes on, had on like a polo shirt, carrying his Starbucks, like from the top to like his ankles, everything seemed, like he could be your average college student. So the long story short is, there was a guy across the platform who was like, dude, why don't you have shoes on? Like, go put some shoes on, ew. And he responds back, he's like, no, man, it's fine. Like, I haven't worn shoes in 4 years. It's great. And so I'm standing here and I'm just like, the blinkers go off in my brain where I'm like, this sounds like a story, or like, I at least need to know more, right? So had I just, stood there and been like, oh no, this is too like awkward or embarrassing, I may not have, met this guy who I was able to get a story, from, which is that he was your average Joe Schmo who had issues with his feet, where wearing regular shoes made it difficult, and that he is in fact a part of a community of people around the world who don't wear shoes, who actively choose not to wear shoes because it helps their feet. And so, I call him Barefoot Ben, and he's a story, that I was able to go out into, Times Square and film him walking around without shoes, and I'll send it to you because it's really great.
That'd be great, yeah.
But yeah, so don't be afraid, to just kind of approach people and ask questions. That's a big thing in this industry. If that's something you want to get into, being journalism, is not be afraid to ask questions, not be afraid to talk to people, and network and keep in touch with folks, right? Because if this is an industry that you want to continue to climb in, right, and see those goals happen, whether it's in front of the camera or behind the camera, our industry is so small. And so you're going to see a lot of people again, or at least meet people who will know someone who can get you that internship or get you that freelance gig or get you that position. And sometimes it's a friend or a coworker too. So, making sure you're keeping good connections and being kind to people always.
For sure. So do you have any last words, something you want people to know about your great work?
That you can watch it every weekday on Listen Up on Instagram. So that's at NBC New York. And you can follow along. Oftentimes I'll repost things or share more in-depth information on my own Instagram. So that's at Angrum, KAYANGRUM. And yeah, you can watch Listen Up every weekday on Instagram and Facebook. And like, comment, and share. So yeah, that's everything. And thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for taking the time for this call, and keep up the great work that you're doing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. And you too with these fireside chats. I can't wait for the next one.
All right. Hey, thank you.
Thanks. Keep me posted with school and everything
I'll send
too.
it to you as soon as I'm done.
All right. Sounds good. I love this. Congrats. Seriously. Keep me posted.
All right,
Have
bye.
a good weekend.
You too.
Take care.